Empire crumbling and taking everything with it. We need to nudge and mend things where we can, so that whatever replaces Empire isn't worse.
The Empire will fall. Order will vanish. Interstellar wars will be endless. 10,000 worlds reduced to radioactive cinders. Nothing we do can prevent this.
The human race is an ever-evolving story told over thousands of years by a countless number of voices. And for a long time now, that chorus has been suffocated and quietly erased. Because under the Genetic Dynasty, there is only room for one voice.
Threaten the peace and pay a dear price. Our world will live on. You will not, and neither will your worlds. Not without wounds and scars.
Cannot be prevented. It's massive events rushing to meet us. We can shorten the dark ages that follow. After the fall, our civilization climbs from the ashes. The coming generations will have something to build upon, a foundation.
Hello Foundation fans, fellow Mudbeards, and anyone who's just a fan of sci-fi in general and curious about the show. And today, we're going to be bringing my in-depth recap / breakdown of Season 1 of Foundation. I basically wanted to do a lot of coverage of the show, but I realized there's a lot to it. So essentially my goal is to make a couple videos that sort of help break down a little bit of the series, and for people who have watched the show, remind them of some of what happened so far, and for those who haven't watched the show, maybe get a recap if you don't have the time to rewatch seasons 1 and 2. Obviously, this is not a substitute for the actual series, so during the recap, I am bound to gloss over many different things. Basically, I'm going to be combining different story events so that each story segment can be told in a way that is more easy to digest. That being said, I will be utilizing flashback shots of some characters' origins from later throughout season 1 or even season 2, so of course, spoilers ahead. If you do watch this recap, the twists will be just sort of glossed over and will not hit the same as if you had just watched the series. Another important thing to know is the Foundation series is based off a popular series of books by Isaac Asimov, who ironically enough is some of the biggest inspirations for series like Star Wars and Dune. That being said, this recap will primarily be sticking to the show and the lore divulged within it. So don't expect any book spoilers or comparisons within this video. I'm sure there's many things I'll miss, so if you happen to know any fun facts or trivia or any additions you want to add to this recap, feel free to let me know and I'll try to include it in my Season 2 recap. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and start by breaking down the universe of Foundation. If you want a thorough breakdown of how the universe of Foundation actually came to be, you should check out my timeline video where I go a little bit more in depth. Otherwise, to summarize, essentially long ago, humanity expanded towards the stars, some of them even augmenting themselves so much that they referred to themselves as spacers. We flew so far from Earth that it became a distant memory and formed a galactic empire. Eventually, this empire was led by a genetic dynasty. This genetic dynasty consisted of 3 different clones, all being clone copies of Cleon the First. Within this galaxy, there are 2 other kingdoms known as the Anacreons and the Thespins. These factions of people have constant turmoil amongst each other, but they have come to some form of an agreement over the Anthor Bell. At some point, a boy named Harry Seldon is born. He happens to be a genius. He falls in love with a woman named Yana. They invent the Prime Radiant, a data storage device that helps keep all of psychohistory calculations. Psychohistory being a way to utilize math to help predict the future of humanity. Eventually, Harry loses Yana and their unborn baby. It's then that he moves to the Eye of the Empire in Trantor to work at Streeling University, at some point adopting a little boy named Raish. Gaal Dornick, another key character in Foundation, lives on a water world known as Synax. Fed up with her cult-like village and family, Gaal accepts an offer from Harry Seldon to go visit Trantor. She's tried to convince her family in the past that the planet is doomed to flood, but they refuse to listen. As she flies off towards the jump ship, she ends up meeting Gerald, the same man from before who was welcoming Harry to Streeling University. He helps calm her nerves as this is her first time actually leaving her planet. The Spacers put all the passengers to sleep and they officially take off. However, during the journey, Gaal for some reason wakes up, confusing both the Spacers and the audience, as everybody is supposed to be sedated at this point. They sedate her again and she sleeps for the rest of the trip there. Eventually, the rest of the crew on the jump ship wake up and they arrive at the Star Bridge. Gaal's impressed with everything she sees and then notices that a couple of Imperial caskets are being walked by. It's then that Gerald informs her that there was a scuffle out on the Outer Reach. The Anacreon and Thespis got into another dispute over the mining of the palladium on the Anthor Belt, and unfortunately some Imperial appraisers got caught in the crossfire. The situation was all over the news, and the Empire has actually summoned the Anacreon and Thespins to Trantor as well, in the hopes of solving the dispute in some way, shape, or form. It's then that Gaal and Gerald begin their journey down the Star Bridge, which takes about 14 hours. On Trantor, Raish goes and informs Harry Seldon that Gaal has officially arrived. It's during this time that Raish also seems to share some of his concerns over the future plans he and Harry have, but Harry does reassure him. This is our first clue that a bigger plan is at play than what is actually being presented to us. Sometime later, Gaal and Gerald officially land on Trantor. They separate and Gaal continues to look for the man she's supposed to find. That man turns out to be Raish, who finds her and guides her to Streeling University. She's impressed with everything she sees and then goes to meet Harry. He reiterates how impressed he is with Gaal that she was able to solve the Abraxas conjecture using Calais' 9th proof of folding. It's then that he offers her Calais' original manuscript. You can tell that Gaal's really excited and just utterly filled with joy in this moment. Which is then he suddenly decides to switch up the vibe and let her know that the next day the Empire is going to arrest both he and Gaal. Turns out the Empire fears that his predictions will sow a seed of doubt. Gaal wonders why Harry would even invite her to Trantor at this point. It's then he shows her the Prime Radiant. He watches her as she analyzes everything going on before he pulls it away. He essentially believes that she's the only one who can actually prove him wrong. He then offers Calais' manuscript once more, claiming that one day the entire university will burn. It's then that Raish takes Gaal to go see the only seer from her church on Trantor, and while the seer does offer his help, it cuts away and we're left to presume that Gaal denied it. We then cut to sometime later as Gaal sits within her room. She seems to anticipate the Imperial Guard coming before they actually do. They end up taking her to meet a woman who informs her that she and Harry are going to be charged with treason against the Empire. It's then that she realizes that Harry had actually predicted this exact outcome. We then are officially introduced to the current story's iteration of the Genetic Dynasty. Now, things may get a little bit confusing going forward, as the Genetic Dynasty do fall under the same name for every single Cleon. So, to help differentiate and indicate who we're actually looking at here, until a certain point of the story, we're gonna address them with the number after their name. So in this case, we are introduced to Brother Dawn, who is Cleon the 13th, Brother Day, who is Cleon the 12th, and Brother Dusk, who is Cleon the 11th. It's here we meet with Brother Day the 12th, and he meets with Master Orleo, who's working on the Mural of Souls. The Mural of Souls depicts some of the greatest feats and moments in Imperial history. Turns out, Brother Day is approaching Master Orleo to question why he's harboring some of Harry Seldon's work within his quarters. Master Orleo tries to reassure the Emperor that it was simply curiosity and that he found most of Harry's writings completely gibberish. But it seems that wasn't enough for Day the 12th, as he orders his Shadow Master to take Orleo down. The Shadow Master is sort of the Emperor's right-hand man, able to do and take care of a lot of the tasks around the Empire. If you'll notice, before they applied Master Orleo's blood to the mural, they were applying what's known as active chroma, this weird sand-like material that consistently moves. We then catch up with the Cleons as they all enjoy a nice meal and synchronization. This scene helps indicate to us some of their family dynamics that they have and how important they find themselves in the Imperium. each of them possessing a different role in their family unit. Demerzel interrupts the dinner to inform them that the delegates of Anacreon and Thespis have officially arrived to Trantor. Demerzel takes on the 13th with her so he can learn some of the rules of diplomacy. I think an interesting thing to note in this sequence is the series' attention to detail. See, so far we've been introduced to 4 different cultures within the show, all with their own distinct histories and aesthetic. That being Synax, Anacreon, Thespis, and the Empire. But not only that, we also see that there's subcultures within places like the Empire, both in a difference being those who work in the Imperial Palace and those who just live on the rest of Trantor. This is just a prime example of some of the great world building the show tries to establish right away, which can seem overwhelming, but seems to be necessary for a story of this scale. And none of what we really see here is fluff. A lot of these cultures and characters are very integral to the story. Demerzel guides the Anacreons and Thespins through a tour of the Imperial Palace. They stop at the Mural of Souls, and one of the Anacreon delegates whispers something rude under their breath in Anacreon. But as we see here, Demerzel quickly catches on to this, indicating to us that she also knows their language. Eventually, Demerzel finishes the tour and guides the Anacreon and Thespin delegates to the Emperors themselves. Once they arrive, Brother Day the 12th asks the Anacreons if they enjoyed the Mural of Souls. The smirk he gives tells us everything we need to know. The delegates bestow their gifts from their homeworlds to the Cleons, and everything seems to go well. It's then that the Genetic Dynasty encourages them to respect and enjoy the peace, a motto long established by Cleon I. Sometime later, Gaal and Harry's trial officially begins. One of the first questions being, what is psychohistory? Harry then reiterates that according to psychohistory, the Empire is likely to fall within the next 500 years, and that will likely be followed by 30,000 years of darkness. The Empire still wonders if these predictions are just being used to destroy public confidence, Harry claiming that he's not a revolutionary. Remember that he said this. Harry suggests that if they plan ahead using psychohistory, they can potentially prevent what would be 30,000 years of darkness to 1,000, which if they are able to do so, they should consider themselves lucky. The trial reaches a breaking point, and Gaal ends up stumbling across Gerald again, who reveals that he was secretly working for the Empire the entire time. He ends up giving Gaal the Prime Radiant and asking her to look at it again. He then encourages her that no matter what, she should say that Harry's predictions are wrong. They get back to the trial as it continues, and Harry proposes a group called the Foundation to help create the Encyclopedia Galactica, a form of harboring all the knowledge and humanity's story for the future, and to help prepare for the incoming crises as predicted in psychohistory. They then switch to questioning Gaal, wondering if she can actually be objective considering how lonely she is. This word particularly triggers Gaal because it's the same word that Harry Seldon had used. But at the end of the day, she does confirm and double down that Harry's predictions were completely accurate. It's then that Harry and Gaal are marched out of the trial. But as they're marched out, Gaal seems to look up at the Star Bridge and show some concern. Following this, we get one of the most pivotal sequences within the entire show in the official start of the fall of the Galactic Empire in the destruction of the Star Bridge. We see that a Thespin and an Anacreon sing a song in their native tongue before detonating an explosive on the Star Bridge, causing massive destruction that leaves 100 million dead, and a scar wrapped around the eye of the Empire in Trantor. The destruction went several layers deep into the city structures. The scene then segues to Gaal waiting in her room before Raish runs in and warns her one last time, encouraging her that she should go ahead and tell them that Harry's predictions were wrong. Gaal believes that this means Raish has lost faith in the plan, but before they can keep their conversation going, Gaal is yet again taken away, her and Harry being presented in front of the Empire once more. The Empire is obviously furious for what happened to their home, Brother Day the 12th awaiting Seldon to go ahead and speak first. Harry claims that he had nothing to do with the Star Bridge attack, but he isn't surprised, seeing as the Empire is stretched too thin. It was only a matter of time before people from the Outer Reach would strike first. He then goes down a list predicting other Imperial problems the Cleons will face throughout the series before they finally grow too frustrated. They interrupt him to ask what he exactly recommends to stop all this chaos, and Harry confirms that they need to stop the cloning process, ending the Genetic Dynasty. Harry seeming to push their last button and them all demanding they get executed. That is until Gaal steps in and reminds them that if they kill Harry, they kill Hope, and due to the math, eventually that will lead to their own downfall. This whole conversation amongst these characters are very important for the rest of the story, as these are some of the key players that drive the story forward, and this is some of the only times we actually see them all interacting with each other. Demerzel informs them that the Empire's decided they will go ahead and be sent out into space in exile, establishing their foundation on a distant planet called Terminus. If their foundation proves fraudulent, then they will go ahead and wither away, but if it proves to be useful for the Empire, then the Empire will return and take all the credit. It's as Harry and Gaal walk away from this meeting that Harry reveals this was all part of his plan and he knows all about Terminus. Gaal confirming that she's excited to build a future. Cut to 2 weeks later, and a group of scientists are researching something at a biohacking facility. It's then that they are ambushed by Demerzel and the Imperial Guard, who are looking for answers on what happened with the Star Bridge, finding out that this facility was the manufacturer of the devices used to blow up the Star Bridge. Unfortunately, answers for who actually planned the attack are still coming up cold. Demerzel returns to the Empire to inform the Cleons, and the Cleons question why the bodies haven't been pulled out of orbit yet. Demerzel then informs them that they've been more focused on search and rescue, and Cleon reminds them that the bodies are burning up when they re-enter the atmosphere, and they're a big reminder of the Empire's impotence. Day the 12th here is a perfect representation of Imperial pride, a complete disregard and lack of care for all the people suffering below them. This is only solidified when Day the 12th contemplates how easy it would be just to wipe out the Foundation before they even get started. But he is encouraged to avoid this option by Demerzel. We then cut to a scene of the Genetic Dynasty meeting with the Thespin and Anacreon delegates once again. This time, they are begging them to understand that the logic of them singing one of their own native songs and then denying their activity inside of such an attack doesn't make any sense, but Cleon promises them that somebody will have to burn for this. This segues us into a shot of Brother Dusk working on the Mural of Souls. As he works his way up and down the ladder, we can see that he's struggling a bit, and this is an indicator to us, the audience, that his life cycle is coming to an end. He then ends up taking Demerzel to go and visit the only seer on Trantor that Gaal had visited earlier, only now he's left in nothing but a pile of ruins, praying by himself. He demands answers on what Gaal knows and what exactly her capabilities are, but the seer doesn't really provide anything solid. Demerzel encouraging the Emperor to get out of there, as none of the structure is actually stable enough to be standing inside. As they make their way out, a piece of debris falls and hits Demerzel, but they're able to make it out just fine, leaving the seer behind to collapse with the rest of the rubble. While back on the ship, Demerzel seems to work on herself, indicating to the audience for the first time that she is actually a robot, and Dusk the 11th seems to grow frustrated. You can tell that, seeing as he's coming close to the end of his Imperial cycle, he does not want this to be his lasting legacy, which if he wasn't such a prideful, selfish person, you'd kind of feel bad for him. We then get a very cute scene as Demerzel prepares herself in front of Dawn the 13th.
You know I'm not the same as you.
The rest of your kind died.
They didn't die, they were destroyed by your kind. It's different.
The coldness Demerzel expresses this in is really interesting, because you can tell she can use a nurturing voice when she needs to, but when bringing up this, there's a bit of spite. Eventually, this does segue us into another scene where Dusk meets with the Anacreon and Thespin delegates himself. This sequence is very interestingly shot because it's presented as if Dusk is talking to each of them at the same time, in reality having two separate conversations. What they talk about boils down to, he finds it unfair for the three of them. Essentially, they are all stuck in this position that none of them wants to be in. But I don't think he fully is understanding the absolute difference in weight that they all carry, and the fact that Dusk just has to deal with his legacy and reputation being tarnished, and the Anacreon and Thespin delegates has to worry about not only their lives, but their entire people's lives. But he does confirm to them before walking away that somebody is going to have to take the punishment, despite the fact that he believes one of them, if not both of them, are telling the truth. This brings us to the following morning, where Brother Day the 12th summons the people of Trantor to witness the Imperial punishment that he has broadcasts. It's in this sequence that we get not only a well-performed and impactful moment, but something that does ripple effect down the line of the story going forward. This essentially results in Day the 12th blowing up half of the planets of Anacreon and Thespis, and hanging any Anacreon and Thespin delegates that were still there on Trantor. We can actually see from the other angle of these bombings that a little girl and little boy are running through the forests of Anacreon. The little girl looking up as the orbital strikes break through the ozone layer and destroy and burn everything around her. This little girl will grow up to be known as Farah Keen. After some time has passed, we see as Dawn the 13th and Demerzel stare up at the hanging bodies. Dawn is obviously sitting with this pretty heavily, and Demerzel confirms to him that this is something the Cleons always end up choosing. We catch up on the Foundation's voyage after some time has passed. It turns out they have 54 months until they officially land on Terminus. It's during this time that Gaal and Raish's relationship seems to be flourishing. Something we've seen throughout the series so far is Gaal consistently counts her primes as a form of stress relief, Gaal seeming to be a very habitual person. This then segues us to some members of the Foundation as they go through a simulation on what could actually be happening once they arrive on Terminus. And despite the odds being completely against them, this is primarily in the hopes of preparing them for anything. Eventually, Harry and Gaal meet in an agricultural part of the ship, where they seem to have a conversation about the robot wars and how they used to hang sympathizers for the robots on the apple tree in the Imperial Gardens, Harry informing Gaal that one can still be found today. Gaal claims that she didn't know there were robot sympathizers, and Harry assures her that there are always sympathizers. I believe this is very indicative for where their story ends up going. It's then that they're interrupted by one of the other Foundation passengers calling Harry by his name, and this seems to throw him off, him claiming that he used to go by Dr. Selden before the voyage officially started. Gaal wonders if this isn't just a good thing, as he's forming a bond with the people of Foundation, and without disclosing any further information, Harry reminds her that she has to go attend a meeting. Eventually we cut to Gaal, who's going through a seed bank procedure and removing all eggs and embryos. See, the voyage isn't designed to withstand pregnancy, so they need to make sure they're all safe until they can land on Terminus. We yet again cut to Gaal as she's swimming and counting her primes when she's visited by Harry, who lets her know that she and Raish have far exceeded his expectations. You can see that he's genuinely really proud of them here. Later, during a conversation between Gaal and Raish, Gaal informs Raish that the math isn't fully complete. That even though someone who's really intelligent can make a prediction out of something where the pieces are missing, there are still pieces of the puzzle that are missing. We see that Harry continues to bond with the fellow passengers of Foundation and eventually begins having lunch with everybody. It's here that we see tensions have seemed to rise between him and Raish. And as Raish storms away, Gaal eventually goes and meets with him, and they both have a wonderful bonding moment under an artificial sunset on Terminus. Sometime later, Gaal continues her normal routine of swimming and counting her primes, but if you notice, she's not actually counting her primes correctly here, and she feels that something is off. She leaves the pool and rushes to where this feeling is guiding her, and happens to stumble across both Harry and Raish. Raish having plunged a knife into Harry's chest. They both look taken back as Raish fumbles with Harry's body, and then he rushes, grabbing Gaal by the arm. He leads her to an escape pod and throws her in with the knife, and then sends her off into the vacuum of space, not explaining much. She then goes into a sort of cryostasis, and this is the last we see of Gaal for years. We then cut back to Trantor, 19 years after the Star Bridge attack. We follow Brother Dust the 11th as he's comforted by Demerzel before going to be fitted for his final suit, finding that his suit is just a little too big for him. We then see as he catches up with both Day and Dawn, and we find that Day the 12th is now very much looking like a Dusk clone, and Dawn the 13th is now very much looking like a Day clone, having all grown quite a bit. Dust the 11th enjoys a final dinner with his brothers, believing this is their last gift to him, but they assure him that their gift is not there just yet. They end up taking Dust the 11th up into the wreckage of the star bridge that still remains in orbit over Trantor. While floating through the wreckage, they see a hologram of Cleon I, encouraging civilians to respect and enjoy the peace. It's during this time that Dust the 11th notices Demerzel have a very emotional response to seeing Cleon I's hologram. Later that night, Dust the 11th wakes up hearing a very particular tune. This leads him down to the decanting chamber where they keep all of the clones of Cleon I, ready and prepared to be decanted at any moment. Dust the 11th eventually returns to his quarters and starts painting a mural for the next iteration of Cleon, which should be Dawn the 14th. He then falls asleep and is carried back to his bed by Demerzel. Dust the 11 awakens and officially accepts his title as Brother Darkness, and they officially decant the new Cleon clone in Brother Dawn the 14th. This officially makes Cleon the 13th Brother Day and Cleon the 12th Brother Dusk.
The dream lives on in you.
Because you kept it alive in you.
And we watch as Brother Darkness, Cleon the 11th, takes his final walk off of the stage. But before he goes, he hears Dawn the 14th crying and feels as if something's wrong with him. That's before Demerzel puts a reassuring hand on the small of his back and sings her signature song to push him forward. This whole sequence really helps clue us into the inner workings of the Genetic Dynasty and how the line of succession actually goes down. Now, for the rest of the series, we will have a consistency in Brother Dawn being the 14th, Brother Day being the 13th, and Brother Dusk being the 12th. So I will no longer refer to them as numbers, but instead purely refer to them by Dawn, Day, and Dusk. We then catch up with the Foundation, who after many long months officially make it to Terminus. Upon their arrival, they begin to establish camp, but immediately come across a strange-looking object that didn't show up on their scanners. Upon approaching the object, there seems to be some sort of invisible barrier preventing anybody from being able to get close without passing out. This effect later comes to be known as the null field, and this object comes to be known as the ghost or the vault. For many years, the Foundation grows and establishes themselves on Terminus. We watch as the Foundation continues to grow as some of its members decide to have kids. Some of these kids end up growing with Foundation as it expands, one being Salvor Hardin. Salvor Hardin is a very interesting Foundation member because she seems to be obsessed not only with the stars, but with the vault. The people of Foundation notice that she has a strange connection to the vault and doesn't seem to be affected by the null field surrounding it. But after a while, people's interest in the vault eventually dwindled and it became mundane, Salvor being the only one still interested in it. And over the next few years, the Foundation continues to expand on Terminus. Let's go ahead and touch back to base with what's going on the Empire on Trantor. This is 17 years after Brother Dusk officially steps off the stage and Brother Dawn is born. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a moon called the Maiden, one of the more prominent religions of the Empire in Luminism is founded. And it turns out that one of their old leaders, Proxima Opal, has officially passed away, leaving the position open for a new Proxima to take their place. Message is sent to Trantor to inform the Empire of Proxima Opal's passing. Luminism is an interesting religion because while we don't know its exact origins, we do know that most of its inhabitants like to meet up on the Maiden so they can partake in this challenge known as the Walk Down the Spiral. And if you can make it down the spiral, which is this 700-kilometer desert hike in blistering heat, and you can make it all the way to the end without dying or succumbing to the ailments, then you're likely to come across a cave where you'll witness a vision by the Mother. And if you can make it back, the Zephyrs will go ahead and interpret your vision and what it means. Not many make it all the way to the cave, and many die along the way. But let's go ahead and cut back to the Empire and see what they're up to 17 years after Brother Darkness the 11th has officially passed. We see as Brother Dawn the 14th gets rid of the mural that Brother Darkness the 11th had painted for him, claiming that he's officially outgrown it. After some time has passed, we see that Dawn takes a nice leisurely peek outside of his Imperial window onto the Imperial Gardens. It's then that he decides he's gonna take an Imperial jump and pulls the Tommen from King's Landing and leaps out of the window. Only in this situation, he has what's known as an Imperial aura. So fortunately for him, he did survive the fall, but unfortunately for him, a pesky gardener witnessed the whole act and runs away in fear. Eventually, Dawn the 14th meets with Day the 13th and Dusk the 12th, and they officially receive news of Proxima Opal's passing. And while they share their condolences, they look forward to the next Proxima to take her place, going by the name of Zephyr Gaal. However, the messenger informs them that there's someone else who's been gaining a lot of the people's favor in Zephyr Halima. This is a problem for the Empire, as Zephyr Halima primarily preaches Primera Octavo, which essentially means she believes in an individuated sentience, as in one soul, thus declaring that the Cleons and the Genetic Dynasty are soulless. You'll notice in the sequence of scenes in where the Cleons are informing Dawn on why this is exactly a problem, Dawn struggles to keep up the mannerisms and synchronicity with the rest of his brothers. This then segues us into a later scene where Dawn is drawing a picture of the gardener he saw down below, requesting the Shadow Master to find out more information on her. The Shadow Master later returns to Dawn, informing him that the gardener that he asked him to look into was actually named Azura. Dawn seems to be smitten with her and decides to use an Imperial Firefly drone to go and spy on her. This is the start of a very cute and blossoming relationship between the pair. Brother Day / Cleon the 13th meets with the Imperial's 1,000 mathematicians to see if they've made any progress on figuring out ordinal analysis or psychohistory so they can debunk Harry's predictions. Most of them claiming that Harry's words are just lunacy, but not being able to provide any work to back it up. This frustrates Day, and he unleashes his rage upon the mathematicians, causing one to straight up faint from screaming at him. This segues us into a scene where Brother Dusk prepares to leave to the Maiden to take care of this whole Proxima Opal issue. However, they are intervened by Brother Day, who instead decides that he will be going himself. Dusk and Demerzel urge against this, as no Prime Cleon has left the surface of Trantor in several years. Brother Day is kind of fed up with a lot of the decisions that Brother Dusk has made coming back to bite him. If you remember, this is the same Cleon that witnessed his brother enact all of these issues that he now has to deal with as the Prime. And seeing as he is the Prime, the others have no choice but to listen to him. And he officially heads off with Demerzel towards the Maiden. This leads to Brother Dusk sending an Imperial officer named Darwin and his team to go investigate why the communications buoy went dark around where the Foundation had set up their base on Terminus. Brother Day ends up arriving on the Maiden with Demerzel, and he's a little startled by the Spacers, seeing them as a little bit less than human. Him and Demerzel go over the basics of Luminism in the hopes of preparing him for the meetings with the Zephyrs. It's during this sequence that Cleon asks how someone like Demerzel, a robot, could even have a belief in a religion in the first place, seeing as she wears the bracelet of salt that those who believe in Luminism tend to wear. She informs Cleon that long ago she herself had walked the spiral on the Maiden. Once they leave the ship, rather than being greeted by a normal Imperial welcome party, they're instead greeted by a lone Zephyr Halima. This begins a series of growing tension between both Brother Day and Halima. See, while being respectful to the faith, the only way they can really lash out at each other is through subtle dialogue. And it's very obvious that Halima stands on the fact that she believes that Cleon is soulless. Demerzel considers that maybe she should stay behind considering her faith, and Cleon reminds her that her faith makes her useful to him. And with that, Brother Day and Demerzel go forth to meet with the Zephyrs on the Maiden. We then cut back to Trantor and the Empire, where Brother Dawn meets back up with the gardener Azura and apologizes with some of the ways he's been talking to her recently. It's then that he's interrupted by Dusk, who wants to take him out hunting. Once they go out hunting, Dawn realizes that his natural affliction, being colorblind, is actually an advantage when it comes to hunting. During the hunt, he comes to the conclusion that he's killed many more birds than Dusk has, and he decides to hide some of them, not wanting to raise any suspicions about his defects. Brother Dawn goes and later meets up with the gardener Azura, who I'm just going to refer to as Azura from now on, taking her into the Imperial Palace and to the same window she saw him jump from. They have a very vulnerable and bonding moment together, and it's nice for Dawn to be able to have someone he can confide in, considering all the hesitancy around the rest of the palace. This then transitions us into a scene where the Shadow Master seems to be investigating the area where Dawn and Dusk were hunting earlier. Brother Day and Demerzel officially attend Proxima Opal's funeral. It's a beautiful ceremony that's interrupted by Zephyr Halima, who decides to give a very impactful and powerful speech about sentience and the soul, while subtly putting down the Emperor once again. The speech is so powerful that everybody around that is faithful decides to kneel, and Demerzel herself has to kneel as well, since she is also faithful. This leaves Brother Day standing in bitterness as he glares at Halima. This is a good reminder that while fear can be a powerful motivator to lead people, an even bigger motivator is faith. Day later questions why Demerzel would kneel during Halima's speech. Demerzel defends herself, claiming that because of her faith, it looked better if she would do this. This is the beginning of some continuous suspicions Day has about Demerzel and how her loyalty programming actually works. Day and Demerzel decide they're gonna go visit Halima themselves, and when they go down there, they see people who assumedly are just suffering on the planet or maybe attempted to walk the spiral and failed, all suffering and dehydrated. Day puts up an extremely temporary act of empathy when he decides to hold one of their hands and almost instantly push it back away. Cleon is essentially trying to get to the bottom of what Halima is actually after, trying to see what he can possibly offer her or what her true intentions are. Day seems to misunderstand her unyielding devotion as consistency to manipulating for what she wants. Cleon tries to defend his genetic dynasty and the fact that they have souls and how much they've accomplished over the years, and Halima reiterates the idea of how important a singular soul can be, thus reminding Cleon that it only took 2 people to take down the entire Starbridge. Their constant verbal tennis back and forth is one of the more engaging parts of this entire season. It's then that Cleon officially decides that he himself will walk the spiral of the Maiden. Back on Trantor, Brother Dawn ends up meeting up with Azura for a hookup sesh. She ends up giving him some color correction adhesives so he can withstand without his color blindness or worry about it. Dawn then opens up about all the differences he has between him and his brothers and that he really does feel like he's broken. And the bad part about a broken clone is that you can always make a new one. It's later that Brother Dust decides he wants to take Dawn out because he can see that he's been so stressed. He wants to teach him to be a man and takes him to the Imperial Copulation Gardens, where the Emperors are allowed to enjoy themselves and relieve their stress, while any others involved get their memory erased immediately afterwards. Dawn ends up taking a girl back, but rather than sleeping with her, he begins to just open up about his thoughts with Azura. But unbeknownst to him, this particular woman wouldn't have her memories erased and is then taken by Dusk, who demands she inform him of everything Dawn had told her. It seems ever since the hunt Dusk had with Dawn, he's been growing suspicious. Azura and Dawn's bond continues to grow as she tries to encourage him to leave the Imperial Palace, claiming that the rest of Trantor is actually pretty nice, especially since the scar came. Brother Day and Demerzel prepare for his walk down the spiral on the Maiden, Demerzel reminding him that this is the first time he'll be induced to the ailments and physical exhaustion, removing all Imperial technology that helps keep him safe. Brother Day officially embarks on his journey, eventually stumbling across a man who explains a little bit of why he's here. It's during this story that he brings up another person who apparently made it to the end and got a vision, describing to Day what the vision actually held. And interestingly enough, Day has a very funny reaction to this entire beautiful scene.
She didn't say what happened next, but she said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen.
Eventually along their walk, the man Brother Day encountered falls to his knee. Brother Day tries to help him up, encouraging him to keep going and that maybe his faith isn't even real and this is his last real chance. Maybe he won't be embraced by the mother or any god. The man falls down to his final knee and asks that if Day and him end up meeting again one day, Day lets him know what he saw. This leaves Cleon to continue the journey by himself. He ends up barely making it to the cave's entrance, littered in skulls of those who barely made it. In a sense of pride, he smashes one of the skulls and enters the cave. He then later returns to the Zephyrs and explains to them the vision he had.
The floor of the cave took the form of a stem. It had 3 large petals.
The Zephyrs explain what this vision could actually mean.
After Gaal collided into Sora and created the triple moons, the maiden was covered in a blanket of birth roots. This was a sign from the triple goddess that our world could sustain life. Over the centuries, the flowers gradually died off. We have not seen them here for thousands of years.
What does it mean?
By their nature, 3-petaled flowers germinate from monocot seedlings.
In other words, 3 elements created out of 1.
Just like my brothers and I.
And due to the similarities in both the Genetic Dynasty and the mythology of Luminism, Cleon is officially deemed worthy of having a soul and maybe even having a righteous soul. Halima and all others warned that speaking against this fact could be seen as a sin. As Brother Day walks away triumphantly, he does have some final words for Halima, thanking her for encouraging him to take this journey of faith, while subtly giving her all the responsibility for everything that just happened. It's later that Demerzel ends up meeting with Halima. Halima claiming that Cleon got everything he wanted. She ends up asking Demerzel when she had walked the spiral of the Maiden, and that's when Demerzel reveals that it was 11,000 years prior. This confirms to Halima that all the rumors surrounding the Empire and Demerzel being a robot are actually true. She then realizes that she's only telling her this because Halima won't be leaving this room alive. Demerzel opens up that due to this sort of programming and loyalty to the Emperor, despite how much she does also believe in her faith, she must not actually have a soul. And Halima places a hand upon her cheek and comforts her, claiming that she can't really explain it, but she does truly believe that Demerzel does have a soul, whereas Cleon does not. Halima asks Demerzel how she plans to do it, and Demerzel reveals that she already had implanted the poison the moment their skin touched. She informs her that at the very least, it will be a peaceful death. On their ship ride back, Demerzel asks Day why he felt the need to kill Zephyr Halima, considering that he had already beat her, him claiming that he doesn't feel obligated to really explain it to her. It's here that we finally get a sequence that shows that while Demerzel is sort of a prisoner in this Imperial situation, she does have small moments where she can fight back, this being one of them.
You had a vision? A robot?
I did, and I am pleased that you were graced with one as well. Seeing nothing. I would not wish that emptiness on anyone.
It's then revealed to us that the entire thing was a lie, and Cleon was utilizing the story the man told him and the flower on Demerzel's desk to come up with a totally fabricated hallucination. Cut back to the Imperial Palace, and Dawn is summoned by Brother Dusk once again. He takes Dawn to the Mural of Souls and asks him if he sees what he painted regarding their hunt earlier. It's in this sequence we also get references to things like the Robot Wars and the Golden Horse Rebellion, but Dawn does confirm that he can see what Dusk had painted regarding their hunt.
Thank you.
I'll leave you to reflect on your own glorious moment. Take your time. Appreciate the subtleties.
And as he does, Dawn uses the color correction adhesives that Azura had given him and realizes that this had all been a trick set up by Dusk to prove that Dawn is a broken clone. This leaves Brother Dawn no other choice but to escape the Imperial Palace. He eventually makes his way out by losing his Imperial aura and trading it for a homeless person's jacket, eventually finding his way to Azura. Once he finds Azura, they try to make plans for how they're going to escape, and he claims that he needs to get rid of the Imperial nanobots. It's here that Azura finally reveals her true colors. Dawn ends up being captured by Azura and what seems to be a clone of himself. They reveal that they're getting started on a plan they've been enacting for many years. Essentially, they tampered with the cloning process and they knew that Dawn was altered. Their plan was to raise another Dawn of their own and have him replaced. It's during this sequence of events that we see Azura showing what could be seen as a little bit of nurture his way, but we really see that she does not care about Dawn in the slightest. It seems this group of rebels are getting exactly what they wanted until it turns out the Empire isn't as foolish as they think. That's when Brother Dusk and the Imperial Guard bust in and take everybody down except for Azura, who they shroud and capture. It's here that Dusk then approaches Dawn and lets him know that being young and making foolish and stupid decisions is forgivable, but having DNA that's been tampered with is less so. However, neither Dawn or Dusk can make any decisions until Brother Day returns, seeing as he is the Prime. Upon Brother Day's return, he speaks with Dusk, who is strongly encouraging him to get rid of Dawn, seeing him as a broken piece of the Genetic Dynasty. He then goes to meet with Dawn and seems to have the intention of ridiculing him, but Dawn does bring up the fact that a lot of them are just echoes of a singular man, begging Brother Day to use empathy. It seems that some of what Dawn is saying here is actually getting to Brother Day as he walks away. Brother Day then goes to meet up with the gardener Azura who started this all to go ahead and bestow a beautiful Imperial punishment. He approaches her in a very calmly manner and seems to be having a normal discussion with her, but once it comes time for the actual punishment, it's pretty brutal. Take a look.
Even as we speak, every member of your personal constellation is under our surveillance, a particle beam targeting each of their brain stems. At my signal, they will all cease to exist. They're all gone. You will be sensory shrouded for the rest of your life, He will never see, nor hear, nor smell, nor taste, nor touch again.
Now, this punishment is horrifying for many different reasons. One of the primary ones being that one of the last things she saw visually before presumably getting shrouded was all the beautiful greenery of the garden, which now is forever going to be associated with everybody she knew being killed. So even in her darkest memories, while having no sensations, she won't be able to think about beautiful greenery without also thinking of this moment. That's some serious psychological torture. Later, Demerzel ends up meeting with Brother Dawn, admitting that Demerzel must hate him as he's a broken clone. Demerzel assures Dawn that she can never hate any of the Empire, while placing the hand on the small of his back. He's brought before both Day and Dusk, and Day officially goes on a speech, confirming that he believes maybe it's time the Empire decides to show a little more sympathy and empathy once in a while, and that maybe the better solution is to leave Dawn be. This infuriates Brother Dusk, as the Genetic Dynasty has only consistently maintained the level that it has because of their devotion to keeping things perfect. The tensions escalate between Day and Dusk until Dusk officially starts hitting Day. This leaves Dawn to flee into Demerzel's arms, fearful of what might happen to him, and as things seemingly reach a boiling point, Demerzel then snaps Dawn's neck, in arguably one of the most shocking scenes of the entire series. Mathematically, I guess you could say her robotic mind analyzed all the different situations and saw that this was the best possible outcome, but still, Brother Day hovers over Dawn's lifeless body as Dusk quickly moves on to the next subject, demanding that another Dawn be prepared and decanted the next day by breakfast. Demerzel looks to Day, confirming that she is always going to be loyal to the Cleonic dynasty. The scene then cuts to Brother Dusk at the Mural of Souls, staring at the birds he used to basically entrap Dawn and lead to what inevitably became his own demise. It's then that the Shadow Master goes to inform Brother Day that the tampering with the clone's DNA goes down all the way to the source, as in Cleon the First. This basically means that both Day and every other Cleon going forward are all tampered themselves. The irony of this breaks Day, and he officially starts smashing the Emperor Cleon I's casket. This then leads us to the final scene of the Imperial Storyline in Season 1, and that's the last we see of the Imperial Storyline in Season 1. Now we're going to cover the events of what transpires with both Harry and Gaal. We follow Gaal after some years has passed as she wakes up from the cryopod on a brand new ship. She explores the ship and realizes that she doesn't really have access to its primary functions. Eventually she finds some workarounds and begins researching on some of what's transpired since she's got sent away in the cryopod by Raish. It turns out the Foundation was officially established on Terminus, but upon looking into what exactly happened involving Harry's death, it turns out that she and Raish are primarily held accountable for his murder, with Raish having been floated off into space after refusing to give the Foundation any answers or throwing Gaal under the bus, claiming that it was just his idea alone. This almost completely breaks Gaal, having lost her planet, the love of her life, and several years of time. She heads to the shower and contemplates unaliving herself until the ship seems to veer course, sending her flying through the air. She tries to figure out where exactly the ship is headed, but still doesn't have any access, so she continues to find workarounds to outsmart the ship and eventually comes to the conclusion that they're heading to Harry's homeworld of Helicon. This is something she absolutely refuses to do, seeing as most of the galaxy believe that she murdered Harry. It's then that she's interrupted by a glitching form of Harry who appears on the ship. She realizes that this is a digital form of Harry that seems to be struggling with what happened moments up to his death. Gaal finds a way to finally tether him to the present. She asks how he's here, and Harry informs her that a copy of his consciousness was downloaded into the knife used to stab Harry. It's then Gaal reveals to Harry that Raish is dead. Harry disappears and all of the ship's systems shut down, almost suffocating Gaal before Harry returns, offering a form of explanation. Essentially, Harry had inherited the same cognitive disease that his father had and was worried that once the Foundation was established on Terminus, he would become nothing more than a crackpot. And he truly believes that his death actually galvanized the Foundation and increased their chances of survival once they landed on Terminus. His original goal was for Harry to kill himself and have Raish sort of explain what happened. Then, a week or two later, having Raish finish escaping the escape pod and heading off to Helicon to officially start the second Foundation, while Gaal stayed with the first Foundation to establish it on Terminus. However, whatever strange feeling Gaal had that led her to witness the entire act had threw off the entire plan. They specifically aimed for this moment to happen while Gaal was swimming and counting her primes. Gaal is upset at this news, as it means that in no version of Harry's plans were her and Raish ever going to be together. They begin to argue over Harry's plan until eventually Harry brings up the fact that none of this would have happened if Gale's continuous strange feelings didn't keep occurring, then highlighting how Gaal consistently seems to know something's gonna happen just before it happens. Harry informs Gaal that it's actually a good thing that they're heading to Helicon to start up the second Foundation, seeing as the first Foundation was built on Imperial charter and was always designed to sort of draw fire. And it's because of this that the second Foundation has to remain a secret. Gaal asks specifically why it has to remain a secret, and Harry refuses to tell her. It's at this point the lack of information and trust finally gets to Gaal, and she threatens to walk away. Harry trying to convince her to not be foolish, informing her that some of the people on Helicon could maybe study and analyze her abilities and potentially even use them. Gaal reiterating once again that she's tired of feeling used. Growing continuously frustrated, Gaal leaves Harry no other choice, breaking the ship's heating system and forcing Harry to choose to either watch Gaal boil alive or let her escape on the same pod she arrived in. Eventually, Harry reluctantly opens the doors, allowing Gaal to leave, her walking away and grabbing the knife that murdered Harry before stepping into the pod and launching back into space. We'll go ahead and cut to the events of the first Foundation and their adventures on Terminus. After several years being established on Terminus, we open with a shot of one of the Foundation members being Polly, a kid who meets up with some of his friends to go explore near the vault. They challenge themselves to enter the null field and plant their flag as far as they can, no one ever making it as far as the Warden of Terminus, Salvor Hardin, although Polly does try and ends up falling over in the middle of the null field. It's later that Warden Salvo ends up picking him up and bringing him back to Foundation. The scene then segues to Warden Salvo working on the gate surrounding Foundation and bonding with her dad a little bit. It's then they both attend a meeting the Foundation's having, and Salvor likes to keep her mouth shut as she flips her coin, a lot of them discussing what's essential and what's not essential to save for the human experience for later. Salvor ends up meeting with her mom and discusses the fact that the null field emanating from the vault is actually expanding, and eventually will reach the point where the people of Foundation will have no choice but to move. Salvor considers that the vault could actually be waking up, and that the first crisis Harry had talked about years ago could officially be starting. It's here that we're introduced to Hugo. He's a surviving Thespian of the original Anacreon and Thespis bombings. It turns out he spent his years entering cryo-sleep repeatedly so he can do long hauls through space. We see that he has a very good standing with the people of Terminus, and he meets up with Salvor, them both seemingly in a very healthy relationship. After reuniting, later that night, Salvor wakes up and begins heading towards the old wreckage of the Foundation's ship. She sees a little boy running and follows him inside. Once inside, she looks up through the debris and sees that there's an Anacreon ship outside of Terminus's orbit. She reports this to the Foundation, and they realize that there's 3 different Anacreon gunships outside. She wonders if all this is potentially tied to the vault, seeing as the null field is expanding around the same time that the Anacreons did arrive. They attempt to reach out to the Empire, but the communications buoy was tampered with, leaving them unable to reach out for help. It's due to this communications buoy going out that Dusk ends up sending an Imperial ship to investigate what's going on. Salvor's mother shows her the Prime Radiant, seeing if maybe Salvor has any specific reaction to it. Unfortunately, Salvor does not. Later, Salvor ends up getting yet another hallucination of the little boy heading towards the wreckage. She follows it yet again and finds a wounded Bishop's Claw. It's here that she's ambushed by Farah Keen, the Grand Huntress of the Anacreons. At first, Farah and the Anacreons try to play it off that they're just scrappers, and Salvor quickly looks past this. It's then that Farah demands that Salvor take them to the center of Foundation. They begin their march, but are stopped at the gate Salvor was working on earlier. She claims that they're DNA designated, and she can only walk through the gate with one single Anacreon. Farah deciding that it's gonna be herself. They make it through the gate, and Salvor begins driving Farah towards the Foundation center. It's here that she decides to take an alternative route and knock Farah out using the null field from the vault. Salvor brings Farah back to the Foundation and brings up how the Anacreons are setting up heavy equipment outside of Foundation's gates. Salvor sends folks to watch the perimeter surrounding Foundation as she and Hugo continue to interrogate Farah. Here we get a better look at Salvor's abilities as she's able to pinpoint what exactly is driving Farah to do all of these things. Being predicted so easily angers Farah and she lashes out at her. Salvor walking away and telling everybody that all she sees within Farah is darkness and death. Hugo and Salvor go to the Foundation's gates and watch as the Anacreons set up some type of cannon. The Anacreons go ahead and set up a form of spectral cloaking around the cannon, confusing Hugo since they're right there watching them. That's when Salvor realizes that the cloaking isn't for them, it's for an Imperial backup ship whenever it arrives. And just like that, the Imperial ship did arrive. Salvor tries to warn the Imperial ship that coming near Terminus is exactly what the Anacreons want, but they are cut off communication-wise before they're able to heed her warning. The Foundation prepares Farah to meet with the Imperial commander, but that's when she enacts her plan, ripping out her eye and activating what's known as a fuel disruptor. This allows all the gates around Foundation to fall and the Anacreons to rush in, wreaking havoc and chaos. And as the Anacreons and Foundation members continue to fight on the ground, Salvor makes it inside and ends up getting into a heated battle with Farah. This is one of our first good looks at Salvor's combat prowess, as normally a Grand Huntress of Anacreon is no easy combatant. But unfortunately, Farah the Huntress is able to come out on top and forces Salvor to watch as the chaos ensues around Foundation and they shoot the Imperial ship out of the sky. The Grand Huntress ends up imprisoning Salvor, and later, Polly and his friends are able to save her and bring her back to a cave. Farah and the Anacreons begin selecting specific members of the Foundation who can help man a ship. See, it turns out she's trying to gain access to a vessel known as the Invictus. The Invictus was an old Imperial ship that disappeared many years ago and was before spacer technology even existed. Rumor has it disappeared without a trace. Farah's plan is to seemingly use this ship against the Empire. Salvor reunites with Hugo and her dad, and they embark on a mission to try to stop some of Farah's gunships, and her dad is successfully able to do so at the cost of his own sacrifice. Salvor having suffered yet another strange hallucination in the middle of combat. This results in Salvor blaming herself, but vowing vengeance against Farah for all of this carnage. Hugo and Salvor head back towards Foundation as Farah and the Anacreons prepare to bed Hugo's ship, the Beggar, but not before Hugo is able to transmit all commands over to Salvor, thus requiring that the Huntress keep Salvor alive, as the ship will only listen to her from this point forward. And seeing as Hugo is the only pilot, he's also joining for the ride. They end up driving to the Anther Belt, Hugo stating that he used to work on some of these asteroids mining palladium. But once the Empire took back their tech after the planet bombings, they were no longer able to keep up the industry. The crew prepare and leap for a spacewalk to try to land on the Invictus, and everyone seemingly makes it except for Hugo, who misses the landing and seems to float off into the void of space. This devastates Salvor, but they need to keep moving before the Invictus's defenses starts taking everyone out. The crew come on fire as they make their way towards the entrance of the Invictus, and the Imperial commander is able to push ahead and use facial recognition so that everyone is able to get inside. Unfortunately for him, once everyone is inside, Farah turns around and blasts him, leaving his dead body floating into the vacuum of space. This is just another example of how cold and angry Farah actually is. It probably doesn't help that she's also Imperial. As the crew pushes their way past dead bodies of the Invictus, exploring every parts of the ship, Lewis notices that the lights that keep flashing in sequences are actually shortening. This leads Farah to reveal her full story, that one day the Anacreons had spotted the Invictus pop back into orbit around the Anther Belt. She believes this was a gift from the gods so that she could enact her revenge against the Empire. They theorize that something went wrong with the ship's jumping capabilities, and the old crew of the Invictus ended up getting stranded out in the void of space, either starving to death or turning on each other. We then cut to Hugo, who's floating through the Anther Belt, and it turns out he intentionally missed the Invictus and is now landing on an old mining rig so he can reach out to other Thespins and request aid. Salvor continues to try to reach out to some of the Anacreons, claiming their story doesn't have to be over and there's still Anacreons being born to this very day. They eventually make their way to the ship's hull, but not before Salvor is able to separate herself and Lewis from the rest of the crew. They end up exploring the ship's command deck, where Lewis sort of explains how jump cradles work.
The folding space is as much intuition as it is science. It's like making a wish, a cognitive leap that only a living brain can perform.
They notice that the previous person who was attached to the jump cradle was shot, and that the ship probably struggled to find its navigator. They ponder if they can still possibly utilize the jump cradle without having the necessary surgery. Salvor prepares to sacrifice herself and potentially plug herself in, but not before Farrakeen officially busts in the room, shooting a shot into Lewis's back and instigating a fight between them. It's here that Hugo and the other Thespins arrive to provide backup, taking on the defenses of the Invictus. But unfortunately, the lights that were flashing in sequence have reached their boiling point, and the Invictus prepares for another automatic jump into deep dark space. When the ship does jump, you can notice how it's not just the Invictus itself, but everything within its general orbit, as in asteroids and Thespin ships like the ones Hugo was on. Salvor hallucinates as the jump ship folds through space, but before it can go any further, they appear back in the Anthor belt. Salvor looks around and realizes that a wounded Lewis had used the last of his strength to hook himself up to the jump cradle, sacrificing himself to bring everyone back. Salvor officially leaves the Invictus and jumps through the Anthor belt to the Becker. Shortly thereafter, she comes across Hugo, who informs her that he just woke up and had heard her transmissions from the Invictus. Hugo and Salvor debate on if they should just let the Invictus disappear again once the lights flash out of sequence, but Salvor has this feeling that the Foundation will need the Invictus one day. So Hugo and the Thespins decide to head back to the Invictus and take it for the Foundation. However, they are unable to find Farrakeen. Salvor returns to Terminus and sees that the null field has expanded so far that everybody is completely knocked out. She finds the Prime Radiant and, utilizing her strange flashbacks, figures out how to trigger it, thus activating the vault itself and seemingly stopping the null field altogether. The Anacreons begin to hold the Foundation members hostage before the Thespins and Hugo arrive, thus reaching a sort of stalemate. That is, until later, Farrakeen arrives and holds everybody down hostage with one of the Thespin gunships. Salvor at this point has finally had enough and is able to take Farrakeen, the Grand Huntress of Anacreon, down once and for all. This almost results in yet another conflict brewing between the Anacreon and Thespins until the vault finally opens and a long-thought dead Harry Seldon emerges. Harry then kinda goes over the brief history of the Anacreon and Thespis turmoil and explains that ever since Cleon II, the Empire has been pretty involved in growing the divide between both of these peoples. He then encourages folks to put aside their differences and realize that unification between these people are exactly what the Empire fears, and should they work together, they can prepare to put up a solid fight against the Empire when it eventually does come. It seems that the Anacreon and Thespins heed Harry's warnings and officially decide to put away their differences. An excited Polly goes to meet with Harry before Salvor eventually introduces herself and asks if Harry intentionally has been sending her all these visions. Harry then clarifies that he's not quite sure what visions Salvor is talking about. And it's with this that Harry Seldon officially walks back into the vault, leaving the newfound unification of both Foundation, Anacreon, and Thespins to flourish. The Foundation continues to grow while Salvor continues to get visions of Gaal's past. She finally decides to ask her mom about it, and her mom reveals that due to the seed bank process, Salvor is actually the child of Gaal and Raish, thus explaining why she keeps tapping into each of their memories. It's with this Salvor finally realizes her true destiny, and when saying goodbye to her mom and Hugo, she decides to set off for the stars. We then cut back to Gaal Dornick, who officially arrives on the planet of Synax, many years after when she originally left. Upon landing, she's encountered by, of course, nothing but water. When she eventually makes her way across her old village, she sees that there's absolutely nothing left but just the ruins of a single 2 huts. This can probably be considered one of Gaal's lowest points throughout the story, where she genuinely is the loneliest she's ever been. But thankfully, when she's looking down beneath the surface of the sea, she happens to see a flickering light. She dives beneath and finds that there's another ship that crash landed and another cryopod down beneath. She pulls the survivor out of the cryopod and brings them back up to the surface. She wakes the survivor up, inquiring about who they might be, and that's when they officially reveal that it is Salvor, who journeyed into the stars specifically to find Gaal. And with that concludes the story of Season 1 of Foundation. I know this was a longer video, and it took even longer to put together, but I needed to make sure that before I started making videos for the series, I fully rewatched each season so I could take notes on every single detail. So if you enjoyed this video or want to see more Foundation videos, it would seriously mean a lot if you could like, share, and subscribe, as that shows me and the algorithm that I need to keep making this kind of content. Otherwise, depending on how this video does, I'll either be making quite a few new Foundation videos like theories or ideas, as well as another recap, or I'll just be sticking to a Season 2 recap eventually. This video was a very fun one to make, and it took a lot longer to work on than I thought it would, but I'm very proud of how it turned out. If you enjoyed or want to see more Foundation content in general, it would seriously help if you could like, subscribe, or share. Let alone letting me know down below what sorts of things I missed or could have added, and I definitely will include such comments in my Season 2 recap of the series. But for now, depending on how this video does, I'll either be working on a few more Foundation theory videos or breakdowns before officially starting on my Season 2 recap. And if the video doesn't do so well, maybe I'll just work on a Season 2 recap and leave it at that. Either way, I am a big fan of the Foundation series and would be fully happy to provide a lot of content for it. All you guys gotta do is show that you're interested. Otherwise, I really appreciate the feedback, I really appreciate the support, and remember, don't trust the gardener.